Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. You know that, wait, you don't know the score by now. This is the second episode in 3 days. We've got 3 episodes coming up over the next 3 days. We're going from 0 to 100 really quick. It's a bit scary how quick we're going now, but we've decided to reach out further. The NFL draft is this week. It's on Thursday. I'm scrambling around trying to get as much content as we can for you guys, from mock drafts to podcasts to breakdowns and everything else. And I thought the best way to approach this from a podcasting perspective would be to get the opinions and views of some of my most loved people in terms of like film breakdowns and stuff like that. And as you know, me with my big 38.9-inch vertical, which has now been devalued apparently, cornerbacks are my crush. That's always been my area. So I did the cornerback consensus a couple of years ago. I've always been massively drawn to breaking down the position, talking to former players, current players, coaches, and trying to work out what makes a good and bad cornerback. Like, what happens on blown assignments? Is it down to the corner or the safety? And I've been lucky enough to get on someone I massively respect and look up to. And that man is Eric Crocker, a former NFL defensive back, Arena Bowl champion, used to play for the New York Jets. He now runs his own podcast, so that's the Press Coverage Podcast at PressCovPod on Twitter. You can follow that and get your best DB and wide receiver analysis possible. But Eric posts so many film breakdowns on Twitter, helps show you guys the stuff you'll miss on TV that maybe don't have time for a big 10-minute film breakdown. And it's an honour to bring him in because the Eagles, as we know right now, are in a very weird spot with corners. There have been mock first-round corners for about 6 months, much to the dismay of Eagles fans everywhere. So now we're going to find out what the reasoning is, what do the Eagles have at the cornerback position, where are they likely to bring in a corner, and of course I've got to try and justify a Ronald Darby take or two. So buckle up, strap yourselves in. If you're new around here, guys, hit that subscribe button. It would mean the absolute world to me. We're on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, YouTube, I forget all the other ones, iHeartRadio as well. Just hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you fancy. Without further ado, here's Eric Crocker. As someone that kind of is hungry for cornerback analysis 24/7, Eric may be one of the best at evaluating the position. How are you doing today, my man?
Man, I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. Obviously now it's a very big week, okay? We've got the NFL draft in just a few days. It's going to be like the most exciting time of the year for you, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like Christmas pretty much, you know? It's like Christmas time.
So, when you look at the cornerback class this year, I wanted to touch on this straight away, kind of get right into it. There does seem to be a bit of a higher drop-off in compared to years past from like round 1 talent downwards. What are your opinions on the cornerback class this year? Are there names that stand out? Is it as steep as people are making out? Or like, what do you kind of see from that position?
I see it's deeper in like rounds 2 and 3. I don't think it's as top heavy as we've seen in the past. You know, last year we saw, Denzel Ward go number 4 overall. And then after that, you had Jair Alexander go pretty high. You had Mike Hughes go first round as well. I don't have anyone in this class rated quite as high as some of those guys. But from the second round on, I think it's a much more talented group than what we saw, like last year.
It's been really interesting to watch develop as well, especially from an Eagles standpoint, where and no one kind of knew what was going on with this. So for the last few months, all you saw from the senior draft analysts, or the big names, so to speak, in that industry, were cornerbacks being mocked in the first round, left, right, and centre, and no one could really work out why, given the amount of depth they have. And now you kind of look at the position and the way it could play out in the next couple of years, where you've got Mills and Darby both on 1-year deals now, essentially. There could be a sense of, I guess, long-term need there. If you're a team like the Eagles who's got a plethora of talent, especially young talent, is this the draft you would draft highly, or is it more of a developmental sort of cycle?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's a developmental cycle. If I'm the Eagles, you guys pick late first round, right?
Yeah, so you got 25th overall.
All right, so with the 25th overall, I think you guys are in a prime position to be able to grab a cornerback and it not be too high. Like I'm a 49er fan, and we have the number 2 overall pick. Where even if we traded back in the first round, traded back into but stay in the top 10, I don't think there's a cornerback that I would take there. Now, if you're at the 25th pick, that's a lot different. Depending on what the Steelers do, who are a few picks ahead of you guys, and people are thinking they might go cornerback, they might go receiver, but if they don't go corner, that kind of helps you guys. And I think a very talented cornerback will drop to the Eagles. So at that point, you might have Byron Murphy, who I'm extremely high on. He doesn't have the top end speed that some people would like, but I mean, he does everything else well. And with the Eagles playing a lot of off coverage, keeping a lot of things in front of him, he has very quick feet, very twitchy, very good change of direction. He could be somebody that would be like a great fit. Now, he doesn't have the top end speed that you might like from some guys, but he definitely has everything else.
I was going to say Byron Murphy would be the one name that I would probably just jump straight in for. I guess the issue that the Eagles have is that they're kind of in that boat at 25. I would say more inclined to get a safety because you've got guys like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you've got Nazir Adderley, both kind of fringe first-round picks. And they've only got 3 safeties right now, depending whether or not they move Avonte Maddox up or not. They like playing Jenkins down in the box. What would you say, if you're sat at 25 right now, would you rather go for a name like CGJ or Adderley, or would you go for a cornerback, just in that kind of realm?
Well, really, I think somebody who's a little bit more slept on and probably is a better prospect than most of the corners I like is safety Juan Thornhill from Virginia. And, I mean, he can literally do whatever you need to do. He lines up all over the place. If you need him at single high safety, he has the range. He has the ball skills. He had, 10 interceptions in the last 2 years. He has good size. He's 6 feet, 205. He ran a 4.42 at the combine. He jumped, his vertical jump was 44 inches, broad jump 11.9. So he's a freak athlete, kind of like Byron Jones was when the Cowboys drafted him. But even more so than being a freak athlete, it's what he puts on film. That's what drew me to him first. And even before the combine, I wanted the 49ers to take him second round at the top of the second. If 49ers had a late first round pick like 25th, I would have been saying, take this guy at 25th. I think he's that good. His coverage skills, he had one of the best PFF coverage scores out of all safeties. He tackles well. He's not a thumper, not a big hitter, but he plays in the box. I mean, he literally could play in dime situations. They would play him at like middle linebacker, it would look like, and he'd match up against tight ends. He could match up against slots. He's twitchy. He's very quick, very athletic, very explosive. I think he's probably overall my number one defensive back. Like, I'm not even talking about just cornerbacks. I mean, corners, safeties, whatever. He's probably my top defensive back in this draft. So if I was at 25 and safety was a need and I want somebody that's extremely versatile and well-rounded and has a very high ceiling, it would be him. It would be Juan Thornhill.
That's really, I mean, it definitely sounds like you've got the draft crush for him. Now, there's no mistake in that. I would say, I mean, on that note of just kind of draft crushes, is there a name maybe slightly deeper in the draft that you just kind of get the flutters on when you're looking at the film and he just does everything right?
Yeah, I'd say a name that's kind of been climbing up boards a little bit, and that's Lonnie Johnson.
Yeah.
I like him, outside corner. I think there's a lot of room for improvement with him. He's not like just some raw athlete, but there are a few things that he can improve on technique-wise, which, that's the same thing with most of these guys coming out right now, coming out of college. But big body, I think he moves very well for his size. He has feet. He can play off coverage. They did a lot of off stuff with him in zone. In press, he did a good job of staying square and using his body. Sometimes he would give free releases, but I'd say half the time he did a really good job of getting hands-on. So if you're talking about in that late second to third round range, Lonnie Johnson would be somebody that I'd be interested in if I needed a cornerback.
I think one of my biggest draft crushes at corner this year has been Jimmy Moreland. I think that's a guy that honestly, I guess the thing with that though is that it's someone that, like, you want a physical corner, someone that's going to come down and hit, but although he's only 5'11", that just comes up and plucks balls out of the air like it's nothing. The knock has always been that level of competition, that it is FCS or FBS level. It's not quite the elite level we're seeing from some of the higher corners. With quarterbacks, you're seeing that matter a lot less. When you get to defensive back, how much does that level of competition... It's the same with Nazir Adderley, right? A lot of people are overlooking him because he played at Delaware. Is it the same thing? Like, does that matter, and like even more so with cornerback?
Yeah, you touched on Jimmy Moreland. I just recently did a pod, and not a spoiler alert or anything, but he was my sleeper. He was my sleeper pick. So I don't have like a draft crush on Jimmy Moreland, but a lot of things that you touched on, spot on. I mean, ball skills out of this world. With 18 interceptions, broke the record at James Madison. He dominated his level of play, which is what you want to see from someone that's coming from a smaller school. I know you say he's 5'11", which he was listed at 5'11", but at the combine he measured in at 5'9". Wow. So that's what's going to be the knock on him. If he was about 5'10", 5'10 and a half, I think you could see him be more of an outside cornerback, kind of like, we looked at Denzel Ward last year, and it's like, well, he's a little bit on the smaller side, but he was like just a shade under 5'11", and he had extremely long arms. Well, Moreland is a legit 5'9". So it's a little tough to pick somebody 5'9" and maybe doesn't have the freak athleticism as the Denzel Ward did, who ran in the 4.3s, or Jair Alexander, who wasn't as tall but ran in the 4.3s. Moreland is more of a 4.45 guy, which is decent, but he's also shorter than those guys and don't have as long arms. So I think he'd be best suited more in the slot just because of his lack of length and just doesn't have that elite top end speed. But he is somebody that's really sticky in coverage. I really like what he brings to the table. And then again, those ball skills, 18 interceptions, that is just amazing.
Absolutely. And I think you'd be the perfect person to touch on this angle. So because of your own football career, kind of coming out of a slightly smaller school, then going to the Arena Football League and then having the opportunity with the Jets, with this whole small school reputation now, it feels like for the last couple of years there's been a lot more of a spotlight on the smaller guys from bigger teams. Is that something you've noticed, kind of stepping away and looking at the analysis side of it as well, or even something you experienced through your career?
Well, I think it's always been, small school. There's always going to be some small school gyms, right? And even James Madison, I mean, that's still Division I. It's just Division I AA, right? It's the FCS division. So, me, I went to a D2, which is even harder. You come from a D2 or a D3 in like a Thielen, right? Adam Thielen, I think he went to like a Division III school. It's harder to get those opportunities. In practice, I remember there were times where, in 7-on-7 or team, I might get 3 reps, where the 1s and the 2s are getting, 12 reps each, Yeah. So you have very, less room for error. I think small school guys, people notice them. They just know that they could probably take them later. Now, you do have your outliers like Nasir Adderley, who a lot of people like, and he's pegged to go much higher, late first, early second. But typically, those small school guys, they don't go as high. There's Keelan Doss, right, a receiver from UC Davis, who completely dominated his his competition there. He has good size, 6'2", 210, ran very well, ran routes very well, went to the Senior Bowl, played extremely well, had like 4 catches for 50 yards, extremely talented, but even then, you don't hear guys talking about him in the first 3 rounds, So it is harder, when you have that small school tag on you. But, I think, there are a lot of these guys that can, like, overcome that, and people are going to be like, man, how did he slip to the 4th round? How did he slip to the 5th round? Because, at the end of the day, your film is your film.
Absolutely. I think when you talk about film as well, that's been the one thing that always drew me to you. And I think our first little Twitter interaction came back, it must have been January or February time, and someone left a comment on one of your kind of breakdowns about Avonte Maddox and then linked one of the videos I did on him. And I was just like really humbled. I was, oh my god, like if Eric watches this, I might even get my own draft crush because this is a bit, that's what I mean. Like, so to then see that snowball to now where we're talking about the Eagles and stuff. If we're talking about the Eagles corner strictly at the minute, obviously it's a very interesting picture. I've got a very strong take on Ronald Darby and the way that the Eagles re-signed him and the money that they've paid. And I wanted to hear from someone that's played the position, that has probably had a lot of like a niche analysis on it than I will and knows a lot more about the position than I do. What are your views on Ronald Darby, his play, and were the Eagles right to kind of make that move with the money they did?
Yeah, well, somehow I always talk about it with the Eagles. It seems like they never have money, then boom, all of a sudden they have money.
Yeah.
They've always been a team to like make moves. It's really weird. It's like, man, there's no salary cap when it comes to the Eagles, but they actually have money now. And if you have some money and there's a player like Darby where, we're not 100% sold on them, but let's bring them back to see, what we can get out of them. And maybe, in a 1-year deal, right, can we get the most out of him, maybe end up locking him into a long-term contract. 49ers did that with Jimmy Ward.
Yeah.
Let him test free agency. Wasn't really anything that they really liked out there. Or he liked. So they brought him back on a 1-year, $5 million deal, which nowadays is kind of pedestrian as far as money, for a year. So with Darby, same thing. Let's see what we got. He's talented. I like him. I like his movement skills. I love his change of direction. He has quick feet. There's a lot of good. Now let's just see if he can, be more consistent to, earn that long-term contract.
Yeah, I think injuries definitely haven't helped. That's been something that's said about even when he came back in, I think it was 2017 after missing the first half of the season. It took him a little while to settle back into the groove. But you're right, change of direction, like the fluidity in his hips is like next level. It's unreal. The one knock that I've always had, and I feel like in this scheme in particular, it matters that much more. Like if he was playing in, let's say, more of like a press scheme or someone like that, or somewhere where he can rely on that deep speed to kind of almost shell out those vertical routes and nurse them to the sideline, it wouldn't matter as much. But like you said, the Eagles play a lot of off-man coverage, which means a lot of what they see comes underneath. And Jalen Mills was almost bullied for like 3 years by opposing quarterbacks on comebacks and curls because his click and close wasn't quite as quick to completely eliminate them to begin with. Now that's got better. Darby's criticism that I have, at least, is that his tackling has always been so sporadic and he's not the most reliable wrapping up ball carriers. And there were time after time, last year especially, where there would just be significant yards after the catch made because of a poor angle or because he couldn't kind of stop, drop and roll or whatever it was. And in this scheme, where you're relying on those tackles and to eliminate those screens and the more elusive receivers, and guys like Saquon Barkley who are now playing twice in the division, does that matter, or am I just being a little bit too over-pedantic here?
Yeah, especially with tackling. So there's a saying, cornerbacks are paid to cover, not tackle.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, especially if you're somebody like Darby, where I know sometimes he plays like in a slot for you guys, right?
Yeah, occasionally, yeah.
So, if sometimes you're playing tighter to line of scrimmage or, if you're a force player, you are going to want somebody that is going to come up, and they don't have to be a big hitter, but at least be willing to throw your body in there to get the guy down. So I'm not super big on, guys that they're attempting to tackle, but, you don't want someone that's too bad, like, say PFF is charting them and you see a graphic saying your guy is like the worst tackling DB in the league. You don't want that, but tackling is tough, especially in the open field. So I know with Jalen Mills, I know his biggest issue too is something that I noticed was you want your corners to be aggressive, but it seems like at times he's too aggressive. Just in coverage in general, I've never seen a team or a cornerback get hit with as many double moves as I see the Eagles get hit with.
It's strange, and the reason I can't not pick on Darby as such, but it's heightened more is because I do feel like that Darby and Mills between them have these contrasting skills and weaknesses, and it's a nightmare because I feel offensively it's easy to counter. So with Jalen Mills, very good tackler, very secure, plays aggressive, but like you said, has got really worrying deep field issues where he bites on everything thrown his way. Ronald Darby, on the other hand, is a little bit more composed, a little bit calmer, much twitchier, much more elusive, can get down the field quicker, but it's the upfront tackling. So if you want to throw underneath, you go left. If you want to go deep, you go right. And I feel like because there's no balance, that's where a lot of the issues are coming from. And I can't tell again if it's just me being over-analytical or I don't know. And I thought getting your opinion on that kind of aspect would be obviously really insightful for everyone else to make sure it's not just me pounding a table.
It's tough. It's tough. There's a thin line. There's a thin line. A lot of it has to do with the scheme too. And sometimes you have to find guys that just fit your scheme. So you have more of a balance on both sides so you know what their weaknesses are. I would rather have two guys on the outside where I know, okay, I have these two corners. I know exactly what I'm going to get from them in coverage. I know they're going to do very well in coverage, but I might not have the best tacklers with them. And I can live with that because right now I'm going to build my front seven around that to overcome my outside guys' weaknesses. But when you have a guy that's constantly getting beaten in coverage, deep, and then another guy that gives up stuff shorter, you kind of have a little bit, you get put in a bind there, kind of like you said. So that is tough. That is tough. I would have to watch them consistently over a few games and see if it's something that I feel is like a real issue.
Yeah.
Or if it's just something that because sometimes with defensive backs, we notice when they mess up. A lot of times when they're doing a lot of the little things right, we don't really notice that, as often. So I would have to – I deal with that with the 49ers where there's a Killer Witherspoon, and if he gets beat, everybody, oh, man, he's so trash, he's so garbage. But then, it's like, dude, look at the other 70 plays of the game where he was playing extremely well.
Yeah.
Oh, he's not physical, he can't hit. It's like, well, look at him right here going head up with Adrian Peterson and stuffing him in the backfield. So there's sometimes, especially as fans, we kind of see what we want and kind of run with that narrative. Or sometimes you have narratives thrown out there by beat writers and people covering the team. And sometimes it's a little bit more of a false narrative. So, yeah, that's sometimes the issue, too, with these guys where maybe it's not as bad as it seems. Like I just talked about Jalen Mills, right, biting on double moves. But maybe he hasn't done that in 2 years. It could have been 2 years since the last time he's been on a double move. I mean, I don't know, but I know that's what stood out in my mind seeing him. So, sometimes we have to be aware of that as well.
No, it's a really good point. And I think, you touched on a nice aspect there with the Killer Witherspoon. So I remember that draft, my two main crushes. So I made like a cornerback consensus, like a kind of scouting guide and where I'd roughly grade players. And a Killer Witherspoon and Chidobe Awuzie for me were the two, I was besotted with them. And, what have you made from Witherspoon's progress, the first couple of years in the league now?
Yeah, it's been kind of up and down. I think last year was tough because he started off after week 1. He had an ankle injury, and then I guess his practice habits weren't as good, so he got put in the doghouse a little bit, and he was benched for a few weeks, and once he came back from being benched for a few weeks, he played extremely well. I couldn't have asked for a better cornerback too, but if you ask most 49er fans, they'll tell you he's trash, he's terrible, he can't play, which is not true. Yeah. Now, do you want him to follow a number one receiver around all game? Probably not. But as far as being a decent, solid starting cornerback, opposite your number one, yeah, he can do that. And, I think sometimes, the 49ers get a little too soft and play a little bit too much, soft coverage zone where he's really more suited to be a press man in your face cornerback. And he has good feet, good change of direction, very good movement skills for somebody that's 6'3". He just, for whatever reason, it looks like he's giving up a lot of touchdowns. He hasn't had a lot of help from his safeties. There was a game against the Giants on Monday Night Football where Odell Beckham scores a touchdown, but it's 2-man, and he's supposed to be in trail, and he's supposed to have a safety over the top. Well, the safety came down and doubled the slot for whatever reason, leaving Akello out to dry. So Akello's like, where the heck is my over-the-top safety? And everybody's, well, see, he sucks. He gave up a touchdown. And really it's like, no, there's supposed to be a safety right there. And the safety just didn't do his job. But who looks bad in that whole thing is Akello Witherspoon. There was a play earlier in the year where the first play of the game, 49ers gave up a 75-yard touchdown to the Cardinals, to Christian Kirk. And it's cover 3. Akello Witherspoon's playing. He funnels him inside. He's outside shoulder, forcing him right to your deep third safety. Well, your deep third safety ends up biting down on this crosser that was already double-teamed by Sherman and Reuben Foster. And now you have the middle of the field open, give up a 75-yard touchdown. The closest person in coverage is Akello Witherspoon. So who looks bad? It's Akello Witherspoon. So, and that's what the fans see. They don't know, there's supposed to be a safety right there, deep third, and he just came down for no reason. They just see 75-yard touchdown, and Akello Witherspoon's there. So, he's sorry he gets beat for these touchdowns. And it's like, no, dude, There's supposed to be a safety right there in the middle of the field. It's not. You run a single high safety scheme. And then there was another time against the Lions where he was lined up in a tight split. He was cocked outside leverage, clearly forcing the receiver to go inside, and it was more of a trap coverage. So if the receiver goes inside, the safety picks him up. Well, safety wasn't there. It looks like he just gave a free release for a touchdown. It's like, no, there's supposed to be a safety there. So I think he got burned a lot by his safeties not doing his job. And more times than not, it was Adrian Colbert. So we'll see what the 49ers do there, having those type of issues. That's why I really wanted a guy like Earl Thomas, who you're not going to have those mental laps or drops. So, yeah, but that was his biggest issue, I think, not really having the safeties that had his back when they were supposed to. And it made it look bad, and it makes it look like now he gave up 6 touchdowns when really he should have been responsible for 3.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? It's weird because my genuine next question was going to be how much the assignments of safeties really impact fan perspective of corners. And I'm not even kidding, because I feel like a lot of that, especially these days, where, let's say if you've got quarters coverage or something like that, and like you said, the safety bites underneath or the safety comes back, it can make or break. And I feel like with corners, it's either highlight play interceptions or it's highlight plays for the wide receivers. Other than that, you don't talk about them, which I feel like that's what you want from a corner. If you've got a corner you don't talk about all game long, he's probably done his job very well. And, and I feel like a lot of that is lost on fans as well. But there's one corner that I wanted to bring up, and this is something that I know in terms of NFL trade talks and stuff recently has picked up, and that's Rasul Douglas. So West Virginia product, very rangy, mid-round pick, and for whatever reason, it's almost been what I've perceived to be blackballed in a lot of ways by the Eagles. So there was kind of like the basic rundown, not how much you're aware, but Darby goes down, Douglas goes in rookie season and plays okay. Like, again, rookie teething problems, you expect it, holds his own, gets a bit annoyed when Darby comes back and can't quite get up to speed as quickly. Then 2018, the Eagles get blown apart by injury grenades. It's ridiculous. And then it gets to a point where instead of putting Rasul Douglas in, they bring in Dexter McDougal off the street to play outside first, and he gets absolutely ruined, like, all game. In like 106 snaps, he got absolutely killed. And no one really understood why. Then Douglas comes back, leads the teams in interceptions in 2018. And again, like, he's just not in these conversations. He's got 2 years left on his deal. There's clearly a disconnect between how the coaching staff view him, how maybe the scouting personnel viewed him, and obviously whether there were grievances with the whole Ronald Darby and the benching thing. What do you do? Have you seen that before in your career, or maybe with the Niners or other teams, where for whatever reason the corner just falls out of favour when there's no real reason for that, like on the field at least?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I talked about it with Ahkello Witherspoon. You know, how he was benched for a few weeks and they were rotating him, and I was like, man, he's not the issue. And especially for me, like, really knowing what's going on and kind of seeing it, sometimes there's off the field stuff, and if you don't have insight into that, then it might seem like you don't know. It's like, man, how's Rasul Douglas getting benched when he's not bad? But there might be something like personal going on, maybe with his attitude or his effort at practice that coaches don't like, and maybe they can't trust that, or maybe he doesn't really know his assignments. So it's like when they put him in, maybe they have to dumb down the defense. There are a lot of things that sometimes, we just don't really have insight to and know what the real issue is.
That's understandable. All right, so another name you're going to throw. I'm really sorry for this kind of bombarding you with kind of cornerback names here. Obviously, Sidney Jones. So coming out of Washington, hurt in the draft process, big injury. What have you made of his progress in the league since being drafted?
Okay, so the last time I even paid attention to him, he was playing more in the slot.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really weird because it's like, man, he was an outside corner at Washington and was really good. I thought even the Eagles, you guys drafted him second round, right?
That's it.
Yeah, I thought that was a steal. Like, even though, he had his injury or whatever, but I was like, man, second round for this guy is good because he was probably a top 15 pick before the injury. So it was interesting for me to come back and see him in the slot, especially somebody of his size. You typically want smaller, quicker, twitchier guys because there's so much space and you have to be so good with change of direction. So typically those are the 5'9", 5'10" guys. To see somebody like, 6'1" playing there, to me isn't really ideal. So I don't know exactly how well he's been. I watched like 2 games, and I just thought, like I did like a 2 game, not a breakdown, but I just watched 2 games specifically of him. And I was like, I think he should be outside. So I don't know if he's played more outside since then. I would think when, like you talked about with all the injuries, and I think he's had his share of injuries as well too, right, in the NFL?
That's been the issue. But he's still been inside. So he was a starting slot corner last year.
Wow.
Started off quite strong and then gave up a couple of bad touchdowns at mid-season, got injured. And then obviously Captain Cravon LeBlanc comes in and saves the day and becomes this kind of public icon. And now there's this weird thing. It's like, you've got Jalen Mills, who we perceive to be constantly beaten in coverage. Like, is there a reason you'd move a bigger corner inside? Could it be that injury maybe losing him some kind of nimbleness or anything like that be a factor, do you think?
That would be the only thing I could think of. Maybe he doesn't have his quick feet, but he's a little removed from those injuries now. It's not like it's been 6 months or since the injury. It's been over a year now, right? It's been 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So for them to still have him there, I don't know if they just don't like him there, or if they just haven't tried him there because it's like, hey, we got Darby, we have Mills, and we got Russell Douglas. Let's make sure that we can get Sidney Jones on the field and start him in the slot, which I would think somebody like Darby would probably be more suited in the slot, or even Maddox. You guys have Maddox too.
Yeah, that's the next name I was going to bring up.
Yeah, and I know he played well. I know he didn't have a great game in, I want to say, the playoffs. Was it the playoffs? Was it the playoff game? He didn't have a good game. There was one of those games I was watching and I was like, man, they're going after this kid. But he, I know for the most part in his games, he played very well.
Yeah, it's been interesting because he was kind of dropped everywhere. And he ended up starting outside, inside. He started at safety. And the other question I was going to pitch to you as well is that with the modern game now being built so much on speed, especially on offense, like you want to get those more elusive backs, it's all about screens and chipping away underneath. How much does versatility matter? In terms of, like, if you've got 2 corners stacked up and they're both like mirroring each other, but one is a solid, lockdown number 1 corner, but maybe hasn't had experience elsewhere on the field, or you've got another guy that you can move around but doesn't have that maybe trust outside, which one would you lean towards? Like, I know it's a really hypothetical question.
I'm really big on, the more you can do, the better. I really like versatility. That's why I typically lean towards defensive backs that are more in the 5'11" range, because I can play them outside, especially if they have the athleticism. I can play them outside. I can play them in the slot. They're a little twitchier, better change of direction. So I tend to lean a little bit more towards those type of guys. That's why, with you guys, I brought up Byron Murphy, right? Who's, a shade under 5'11", didn't have the fastest 40 time, 4.55 at the combine. I wish it was a little bit faster for somebody his height, and he doesn't have like the long arms. But I do know he typically is somebody I don't have to take off the field. In nickel situations, which a lot of people are in now, I can have him playing in the slot, and he's extremely tough, extremely aggressive. He can fit right in there in the run game. Now, if it's a base, more of a, I try to get away from base and nickel now, because most nickel situations it's like more of a base situation. So I just call it run down, pass down. But, in the run down, and I want to be in my nickel, I can have him in the slot. I know he can do, everything I need him to do there. If there's a situation where it's more of a, 1 back, 2 tight end, or 2 back, 21 personnel, 2 back, 1 tight end, something like that. And I only have 2 corners on the field. He could be my outside corner in that situation, and I feel perfectly fine with that. So, Byron Murphy, that's somebody who should be intriguing for the Eagles. Just talked about versatility. I think he's a great example of that.
Love that. I mean, what sort of things do you look for in a cornerback? So if you're going to turn on to watch them all 22 deep into the early hours of the morning, which is the only time you ever watch all 22, right? Like, it's never a sociable hour at like 4 in the afternoon. It's always like 1 a.m. till about 5 a.m. going on like this grind of old school games.
Right.
What would the things you look for be? If you're going to just chart a cornerback or look for things, what are the first things you're looking for on tape?
All right, so are you talking about because it's different? It's different. So
Yeah, okay,
are we
let's.
talking about as a prospect coming out of college, or am I talking about just how well a player is playing in the NFL?
Let's go. We'll go with college for now, just because obviously it's NFL draft week, so we'll stick with college.
So the first thing I look for are traits, right? I want to see how does this guy move? How does his feet at the line of scrimmage? How does it change the direction? Um, and when I see all that, really I sum it all up into fluidity, right? So I just want to see how fluid of an athlete is this cornerback, and that kind of let me know, is he just outside, or can he play outside? Can he play slot as well, right? So that's the first thing I look for, fluidity. And then I look for technique, right? And now if you have good fluidity and you have the technique, now you're getting bumped up on my board, right? You're getting bumped up on my board.
Mm-hmm.
And then consistency. So with what he's asked to do, how consistent is he? And another big thing, which probably before consistency, is anticipation. So how well do they anticipate routes? If a guy's pushing vertical and then he, boom, just sits it down for a 12-yard comeback, are you still going upfield 12 to, 3 more yards while the receiver's already stopped? So that lets me know how well their anticipation is or lack thereof. So those are a few things I can see it generally within a few plays. Sometimes some film is kind of harder to watch just because of maybe a college gimmicky offense, or if a college team plays a really soft defense, so I don't get to see them in press to be able to do those things. Sometimes that's tough, but like I just did a breakdown on my podcast Twitter account yesterday on Justin Lane, and I thought Justin Lane was extremely inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I didn't think he showed me that he can do everything, but he just wasn't consistent with it. He wasn't consistent with his tackling. He wasn't consistent with his reading down receivers to his anticipation. His ball skills were terrific. When the ball's in the air, he's able to attack the ball or get hands on the ball. He had quite a few pass breakups, but his film was kind of inconsistent. But I see he has all the tools, and I see him do it sometimes. So to me, he'd be second to third round pick. He's a day 2 pick for me. And that's just kind of how I do it. Now you have somebody like Byron Murphy, who's extremely, extremely consistent. The only thing that's going to bump him down for me is he doesn't have that top end speed. So if you depend on your scheme, if you're a single high safety type team, you're going to be a little more weary of having him on the outside against some guys that are probably faster, or even some guys that are bigger than them and might outmuscle him. So, it's kind of hard to like pinpoint it to one thing, but I guess fluidity is probably the one thing I look at first just to see what type of cornerback I have.
It's really good to know, because I just kind of like try and compare to that, which I would look at it and see what I can learn and that sort of thing. Because for me, I think scouting cornerbacks or trying to break them down is among the most things. I find it the most fascinating position in football, because it's do or die every single play. And
Right.
I think, in my opinion, it's the hardest position to play on the field. So, like, at least with a quarterback, a lot of it you can say, oh, it's because of scheme, or it's because you got outside weapons, and as long as you can game manage, then you'll sort of be okay in certain situations. With cornerback, like, if you're left on an island, that's it. It's you versus him, it's game versus technique, it's whatever. And I find there's just so many more different ways to view it, and what makes a good or a bad corner, or what can make or break a play. And was that what stands out for you as someone that has now obviously gone from a player to an analyst to kind of hosting podcasts and that sort of thing, that's kept that passion for the position?
Yeah, I mean, I just love football. So anytime I have an opportunity to watch football, be able to break it down, and I kind of noticed that people like that. I started doing these clips a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago. And I think when I first started doing it, I probably had 1,500 followers or something like that, maybe 2,000 followers. And since I started doing that a little bit over a year ago, I mean, my following has grown. Every day, I like how you reached out to me about about, coming on the podcast, and other people do as well, like weekly. And to me, it just means that, I'm doing something right. I see something kind of, that people like. And, with my passion for football, it's just kind of been an easy transition for me.
That's awesome, man. It's really good to hear. I won't take up too much of your time because I know you're probably a really busy guy ahead of the draft. What does your next week look like schedule-wise, just out of interest? Is it just kind of focused on your own podcast? Is it a load of other appearances like this one? What's the aim?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, my weeks are like extremely busy because I do make time for podcasting. I do make time for, watching film and breaking it down. But I also train athletes throughout the week. I also coach high school football throughout the week.
Wow.
So I'll be, and then I'm a parent. I have 4 kids. So I just balance everything. I make time. People make time for what they want in life, right?
Yeah.
So I always make sure that I have time to do all these things, and football is a big part of that because, I always have that itch ever since I stopped playing. Right now, what I'm planning on doing is I have my podcast account, so if you guys aren't already following it, it's at Press Cov podcast. So PRESSCOV podcast. And there I just break down, all wide receiver and defensive back play. Right now it's been more focused on the draft, but come season time I'll be, putting clips together, all around the NFL, around college, giving, guys just breaking down receiver and defensive back play. And I'm doing that on my podcast as well. And I think with the draft up and coming, I wasn't planning on doing any like draft recaps until my next episode I put out, which would be on next Tuesday. But I think I might do an emergency pod and just kind of go over who's taken in the first round, have my initial thoughts on that as far as receivers, defensive backs, then do the same thing for day 2. And I don't know if I'll get into that for day 3, but, we'll see. But, yeah, just a lot of just watching film and kind of seeing who falls where. And one thing that I'm really looking forward to doing with my podcast is good fit, bad fit. So if the Eagles draft somebody, like say they draft a cornerback or a safety or even a receiver, I'll watch the film. I'll see what the Eagles like to do, and then I'll list it like, is it a good fit or bad fit, for that athlete. Because I think sometimes we look at there might be a player that you really like, right? It's like, man, I really like this guy coming out of college. He does all this thing, this well, but then he goes to an offense that doesn't fit his skill set, and then he doesn't pan out. And people are like, oh, he's a bust. I'm glad we didn't draft him. It's like, man, he might have been better for your team. It just depends on the fit. So I'm looking forward to doing good fit, bad fit.
I love that, man. That sounds really awesome. I mean, just out of interest as well, like, how much film do you watch on a weekly basis?
It just depends. Typically, if it's something specific, it doesn't take me long. A lot of times I'll watch 2 games. Right now it's college, so I'll put on 2. I'll watch 2 games. I'll watch it straight through one time. Those games are only like 10 minutes or, 8 to 10 minutes or whatever. So on the YouTube. So I'll watch it cut up. I'll watch it straight through. I'll take like mental notes, and then I'll go back, and then I'll grab specific plays that I think I take them as notes. So sometimes over 2 games, like I did with N'Keal Harry, I had over 40 clips, right? I had like 45 clips or something like that. And each clip to me is a note in my head. Mm-hmm. And all I do is I take that note, which ends up being a GIF, and then I write exactly what I see. And I think that shows consistency, because I think sometimes in the especially in the Twitter world, what I see a lot is people show one play, and it's like, look at this dude, he does this, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, he did that this one play, but what about the other 70 plays in the game? Is that something that he does consistently? And maybe he does it one time in 5 games, but what's he doing for all the other reps? And how's that skill set going to translate over to the NFL? So that's the side of it I try to bring. More consistency with exactly who this player is. Like I said, I just watched Justin Lane, and I could have went through that Ohio State game and picked a play here and there. Look how he did this good. Look how he did this good. But then it's like, what about all these other plays where he's not showing as good a technique?
Yeah.
Where he's lacking off. So, okay, yeah, he broke up 4 passes. Great. But he missed 5 tackles, right? He gave up these catches where it's like, where your eye's supposed to be. 2 went away, so you should be squeezing 1. He did that consistently. So those are the things I try to show. Sometimes that other people aren't because they just show more highlights. And I want to show exactly who the player is.
I love that. So really, really quickly, because I feel like I could talk to you all day with this. I know you break down receivers as well. I've got 2 main slot receiver draft crushes, okay? And I need to make sure I'm not going crazy. So Andy Isabella is one of them out of UMass. I think that guy in the right scheme, if they can get him as like a space receiver, get him into like a lot of screens and sweeps and that sort of stuff, could be absolutely brilliant. And the other one's Penny Hart out of Georgia State. What do you make of either of those guys if you've broken them down so far, and what sort of ceiling do you think they'd have at the next level?
Yeah, see, I actually haven't watched any Penny Hart. I've heard his name. I know he was at the Senior Bowl, right?
Yeah.
It's surprising that I haven't because I've heard his name so much, but I just never got around to watching him. And then I haven't really watched too much Andy Isabella. I put on a little bit, and I watched it, and he kind of looked like a poor man's Brandon Cook.
Oof. Okay.
And I don't mean that in a bad light.
Yeah.
He might be a second-round pick, but Brandon Cook was a first-round pick. He was a Blitnikoff Award winner, receiver, right?
Yeah.
So, like, when I watched Andy Isabella, it was – and I didn't watch too much of him, so I don't want to be too overly critical, but I saw some of that type of ability, but not to the extent of a Brandon Cook. So if you're drafting him thinking I'm going to get Brandon Cook, I don't know if he's going to be that. It was a little bit closer to do you remember Ryan Switzer?
Yeah.
So Ryan Switzer, it looked a little bit more like Ryan Switzer with a little bit better top end speed. I know he tested, his 40 time was blazing. I saw that type of ability. I didn't see quite, Brandon Cooks, but Switzer, but faster. And Switzer was good at North Carolina, so
yeah, exactly.
That would be more of a comp. And not just because he's white. I know some people, they compare white to, like I said, the first name that came to my head was Brandon Cooks. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair, man. But yeah, Penny Hart is like my ultimate draft crush for a sleeper. There's something about finding a gem in the late rounds and then just wanting them to do well. Like, I mean, my quarterback hill to die on for about 4 or 5 years has been Kevin Hogan. And I know he's got this weird kind of arm motion when he throws the ball, but even getting into the NFL, when he played for the Browns, actually got game time, I can't see why he's not at least a QB2 somewhere right now. And it breaks my heart, but, then again, my other quarterback hill to die on was Sam Bradford, so maybe that's not my position of expertise.
well, didn't Hogan had a chance with the Browns, right?
Yeah, I thought he played quite well, that's the thing. But yeah, I think that back onto wide receivers really briefly, there seems to be a trend before. I'm really sorry for keeping you this long. I could honestly talk draft.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, it's all good.
So, big slot receivers. There seems to be a trend of like a cluster of mid-round guys that are now built like this big slot, almost like a Jordan Matthews / Chris Hogan almost type slot guy that's going to come in, bully their way through a stem, but has now got top-end speed and a big catch radius as well. So, right. I think N'Keal Harry's one, maybe AJ Brown's another. Obviously, got Jalen Hurd out of Baylor, could be a later round option. What do you make of that kind of receiver in this year's class? Is there a name that stands out? Is that big a name that can slot in?
Yeah, so say like N'Keal Harry, right? The reason why I think he's a big slot is because he's just more suited to be in the slot, right? So sometimes when you see big slots, like a Jordan Matthews, it's because they lack something on the outside. And with N'Keal Harry, before I watched his film, it's like, man, he's an alpha receiver. He's a big dog. Look at his 50-50, catchability, all of that, right? And then I watch the games. I'm like, man, when anybody plays press man on him, he kind of struggles a little bit. And then I watch him. I was like, he's route running from the outside. He doesn't really create separation like that. If you look at some of his highlights, especially. He has some incredible plays against UTSA, but it's like, okay, there's lower level competition. I just randomly watched 2 games of Oregon and Arizona State. And I was like, man, he struggles from the outside. So what they do is they move him inside to give him easy touches, whether it's on bubble screens, tunnel screens, or just to get him matched up against somebody, that's off coverage in the slot where he can, just use his body well. So after watching him, I'm like, I think on a consistent basis, he'd be more suited for somebody in the slot. Where A.J. Brown, I think he's somebody that can definitely play outside and play inside just as well. There are little things that he needs to get better at outside, but he has the quickness. He has the ability to create that type of separation. He just wasn't really asked to do a lot of it at Ole Miss, and then they just threw him outside when DK got hurt. So there are some things that he needs to clean up. I think he definitely can. I see the ability to do it. I don't know with N'Keal Harry if he can do that. There's a lot that he needs to work on. I'm pretty sure somebody will put him outside, and he might do well. I just think he's more suited to play in the slot, if that makes sense.
That's fair. All right, okay, so the one question I'm going to end it on before I end up taking 6 more hours of your time is a bold prediction for a wide receiver and a cornerback in this year's draft. So whether it's a team trading up or a sleeper that's going to take and hire, something that's a little bit more unconventional in terms of this year's class.
I'd say, let's see, bold prediction, cornerbacks. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Sean Bunting will be drafted before Greedy Williams.
Wait, was that? It's in genuinely, or are you being a bit sassy?
Well, no, I mean I don't know that but I could see that happening. I think I would take Bunting over Greedy Williams.
Really?
So, yeah, I would take Bunting over Greedy Williams.
Why would you back that into? Well, if you were gonna position that to a team that's all like loved up with Greedy, what would the reason be?
Well, Greedy, sometimes his play is just inconsistent. I think when he's dialed in, it's really good. He effortlessly covers people because he can run downfield with anybody. But there's other parts that he lacks, and I think he just lacks the genuine want to get in and get dirty. I think sometimes when guys catch a pass on him, sometimes I saw him it's kind of weird. He just like slow down and kind of turn that switch off and not finish the play, right? So, more times than not, he was good against guys, but when he had this type of games, you go back to Alabama, you saw it a couple times. But with Bunting, I didn't have any of those issues. I thought it was very consistent play. I think he can run downfield with the best of people. I mean, 4.41 40. He showed his deep speed ability on film. Now, the issue with him is he didn't play against top-level competition, and he didn't have to play against guys week in and week out like Greedy Williams did. So maybe if he did, his film wouldn't be as good. But, I just saw a level of consistency that I didn't see from Greedy Williams. And I could be completely wrong. Greedy can get to the NFL. And, I mean, again, great length, ability, nice change of direction, good feet, consistent press man type guy, But I just saw too much inconsistencies in other parts of his game and poor anticipation from off coverage that I didn't see from Bunting. I thought Bunting was a little bit more consistent all around.
That's fair. I would say the one thing that always stands out with me at Bunting, the first time I saw this, it kind of blew my mind. That I think the number was 39%. So it was under 39% of passes completed in 2018 when targeted, which is ridiculous. It doesn't matter what level of competition you're at, that's ridiculous.
That's really good, yeah.
The other thing with Bunting is he's got the frame. He's very lanky. I wouldn't be sure if teams would ask him to kind of just bulk up a tiny bit, just in case he kind of gets bullied at the next level out of press a little bit. But, you're right. I would say that I wasn't overly... The thing is, I've just got all emotional about this, but LSU cornerbacks and me don't sit well, and I don't know what it is. So, I was really low on Tre'Davious White when everyone else was in love with him, and I don't know why, and it's been my biggest, mistake seeing what he's done.
He was my CB1.
Was he?
Yeah. I just really I talked about it. 5'11" guys, that's kind of my sweet spot.
Yeah.
It would have been Marshawn Lattimore, but Marshawn Lattimore's hamstrings were so bad in college that I just couldn't. And then he went to the combine, ran a 4.33 or 4.3 something, and pulled up with a hamstring injury at the combine. Yeah. So I was just way too worried about Marshawn Lattimore's hamstrings to be able to really take him high The next guy who I bumped ahead of Marshawn just because of the hamstring issues was Tre'Davious White.
Really? That's mad.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why I was a bit softer on Tre'Davious White. I'm going to have to go back and look at what I wrote in that consensus to see if I had to kind of hold my hands up here and say I got it completely wrong.
Yeah.
But then obviously the Jalen Mills thing, and then obviously now with Greedy Williams, I don't know. But I for me, my soft spot with corners is speedy guys that hit hard. Like, I like dinner cornerbacks, so like top of the route, they're just going to fight for the ball and high point the catch and almost have that receiving like ability to track it. And if you play the ball and not the receiver, I feel like you're a lot less inclined to give up DPIs and stuff like that. So I always, it's the guys with longer arms that are going to high point the ball, just kind of swat everything away and be this almost marauding presence at the backfield. And I think that because Bunting resembled that a bit more for me, that's why I would be on that side of it as opposed to Greedy with you, if that makes sense.
Got it.
So yeah,
Yep,
my cornerback, if I was to build a team of corners, there would just be these like 97-inch arm guys just sweeping around the locker room, just running around. But okay, give me a bold prediction for wide receivers.
My bold prediction for wide receivers, let's see. If I had to give a bold prediction, I'll say I can see something weird happening. Kind of like, I don't know if you remember back to the Michael Thomas draft, where I want to say the first receiver taken off the board was Corey Coleman.
Yeah, was that
2014? So I'm going to go on the edge here and say Hakeem Butler would be the first receiver taken.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
So that's a bold prediction. Hakeem Butler first. And he's not my favorite. I mean, he's my wide receiver 4, but I could see how somebody would kind of fall in love with a 6'5", 227-pound receiver who runs a 4.48, longest wingspan in receiver history at the combine. His 50-50 ability with his match with his run after catch. I could see how somebody could fall in love with that and just say, you know what, let's just try to get him a little bit more consistent. So, yeah, first receiver off the board, Hakeem Butler.
That's right. Who's your wide receiver 1?
DK Metcalf.
Oh, really? Okay. I was expecting another bolt. I was going, okay, I'm going to get Andy Isabella, like wide receiver 1.
No, DK Metcalf. And the reason why, they're just I think because of his poor 3-cone and shuttle, there's a knock on him that he just can't run routes, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Now, at Ole Miss, he just wasn't asked to do a whole lot. It was 5-yard stop, 10-yard stop, go route for a majority of the game. When he did run other stuff, I thought he won consistently, whether it was slants, digs, he won on those things. Out routes, he won on those. He's not going to be a screen guy, but, just more vertically pushing routes. He's going to eat on that. You have to help over the top. You can't just leave a corner one-on-one with him, so he definitely pulls coverage because he's so big, powerful, and fast. You can't press him. His feet at the line of scrimmage matched with his hands, and his explosiveness makes it extremely tough to get hands-on and just stop him. And even after that, you have to worry about running with him, which is extremely tough. Where a lot of times you start seeing guys overplay to one side or the other, and then he wins with best release. So there's just a lot of stuff that I like that you can't – it's hard to teach, especially with somebody that's almost 6'4", 230 pounds. And they didn't help him really. They didn't motion him down to a tight split to get off coverage or anything like that, or do things to run him through zones so he can catch and run. There was really none of that. So I think we haven't even seen the best of him, not even close.
I love that. Well, listen, man, I'm going to let you go because I genuinely feel like we would be here until midnight otherwise, because it's just been a really, really fun conversation having you on. So just before we go, just kind of break down your podcast a little bit more. I mentioned it kind of right before we started the interview and shed some light on it, but from your perspective, what makes this podcast different to other football podcasts?
Yeah, press coverage podcast. There's a person that I really look up to with how they structure their podcast, and it's Chris Sims. I love Chris Sims' podcast. It's real, it's authentic, it's real football talk. It's not just talking out of his ass. He actually watches the games, breaks down the guys, and has a great eye for just the game. And I kind of, not saying I want to be like him, but that's the approach that I wanted to take. So press coverage podcast is receiver and defensive back specific, and everything that you see me post onto the timeline, it's a lot about guys that I really, really watched. I've put a lot of time and effort into like breaking them down and really understanding what makes that player tick. And then I try to, bring that onto the podcast as well, which I'm still fresh into the podcast. My second episode is coming out soon. But the more I get into it, I think people will kind of really get to know me and see exactly like what I see. I try to paint a picture with my words. So even if you haven't seen the prospect, when I'm talking about him, you have a great idea of what it looks like.
Well, I mean, you've done an amazing job of that today as well, man. So I'm sure that if that's the bar we're setting, then it's only going to rise up for you. So best of luck with everything moving forward. If you've not followed Eric on Twitter, you're severely missing out if you're a sucker for cornerback content like myself. So plenty of breakdowns and clips on all of the big names from this year's draft, and of course some of the names in the NFL already. So at Eric_Crocker is the place to find him on Twitter, and again at Press Club Podcast is the way to listen to all of his content. Eric, thank you so much for coming on.
All right, thanks for having me.